Is Yolanda Adams. I'm a marriage family therapist, and I see clients and supervise trainees and associates, and I coordinate the internship program. And this is at Hospice Services of St. Joseph Health. We have two different sites. There's Hospice of Petaluma in Petaluma and Memorial Hospice in Santa Rosa.
Jennifer, I'm also a marriage and family therapist, licensed. Similar to Yolande, I work for St. Joseph's Health Hospice, specifically based out of the Memorial Hospice site. I'm a grief counselor. In my role, it's also multifaceted. I do grief counseling. I handle the intakes for new services for our grief services department. And I'm also one of the clinical supervisors. I supervise our group of interns. You know, hospice is really a health care service. It's designed to support families, patients, and their families who are facing the stress of a life-threatening illness. So St. Joseph's, we often call it St. Joe's. Hospice is one of the oldest hospices in the nation. We're nationally recognized for providing very high quality care, and we have a very solid, strong reputation. So as Yolande mentioned earlier, our sites include both Memorial Hospice in Santa Rosa, as well as Hospice of Petaluma in Petaluma. This position would be based out of either site. Both are sister programs that provide hospice care to patients and families in Sonoma County. So our philosophy is really centered around recognizing that death is a part of life, that death and grief are normal processes, and that this time in life can oftentimes be shadowed by fear, uncertainty, and loneliness. So in our mission, we really take a very team-based approach to providing compassionate and respectful care and grief services to individuals and their families. We provide grief services to anyone in the community that's experienced or is experiencing the death of a loved one. And we serve clients across the entire lifespan. We offer services in Spanish. And a lot of times our clients have experienced a sudden and traumatic death. We're a very unusual program in that our services, our grief services are free of cost. And this really helps to make these services available and accessible to people in the community.
Of course, there's charting all of the direct client services that the hours are acquired for graduation easily. We can definitely give as many client hours as is needed. And doing that charting really requires conceptualizing and actively discussing your work with your peers and with your supervisor, with a group, and with our department team. And this really is a training program, so that there is time that is devoted to that and really necessary because our clients are deserving of really fine service. So we take that very seriously in training and supporting the interns and what they need to really do excellent work. Then of course, there's all the care coordination, which is phone calls to clients and to other providers. We do outreach calls to our hospice families after a few months have passed since they lost their family member. There's a lot of emails. That's how we coordinate our department. And at some point, many trainees are given leadership roles in planning specialty groups or workshops or community events. We do like Dia de los Muertos and special events for child loss. We do community crisis response. So if there's a particular interest for the intern, they may do some programmatic work to pull off a service that's important to them to be providing.
I kind of kick off the process. I'm the person who takes incoming calls from the public, from individuals who are looking and requesting services. I complete the screening process. I do an intake over the phone, and then I schedule assessments to be completed by our grief counselors and grief interns. The counselors and the counseling interns are trained to conduct a full psychosocial assessment. All the clinicians are trained to evaluate and treat the cognitive, emotional, relational, spiritual, and somatic manifestations of grief. They're trained to develop a plan for treatment, whether that's a referral to our own in-house services or a referral to outside agencies and other providers. And we also have a weekly team meeting every Tuesday where the referrals are discussed and made to services within. This can be to support groups or our volunteer services, for example.
Every week, trainees have an opportunity to provide 10 hours of direct service. And the majority of those hours are one-to-one with an adult, but secondary to that would be one-to-one with children or other family units. We do couples work, parent-child work, sibling work, and et cetera. And usually trainees co-facilitate one group a week, depends on their interest and their skill set, but they all have access to have experience co-facilitating. And our groups include art therapy groups for adults and play therapy for children. We have grief groups that are specifically for special losses like child loss and other traumatic loss. Much of our client work, probably most of our individual counseling visits are scheduled every other week. So that does mean that if a counselor is seeing 10 clients, then that means that they generally have 20 people on their caseload, and they're always revolving. So you're starting and ending with clients at different times. So you do learn to manage a pretty intensive caseload that's various, with various services, either individual or group. And then also, I think we didn't say that our grief department actually is also our counseling services, our therapy services is one part of the broad scope of services that clients can receive with our agency. So typically when callers call us and seeking services, typically a death has just happened or within a month or two, sometimes within a couple of weeks. And these calls usually are from callers out in the community, not our hospice families. A lot of times they're sudden deaths. And so they do first meet with one of us, one of the trainees, associates, or licensed counselors for an assessment. And then we typically, if our services are appropriate for them, then they receive visits from the counselor. When they're concluding that visit, they might go to our peer counseling services. It's called hospice volunteers. So we also have this peer counseling, which is a different model which normalizes the grief experience. And so that someone can meet with somebody with a like loss. And then we also have grief groups that are for various times in the grief process. So some are open to folks right away, and others are way more intensive and more appropriate for several months after a death. And then we have annual events. So some clients take part in our services for a few years, but others are just with us for 6 months. So it's pretty varied what they get for, and how our caseload starts with us. But then we also, after they conclude with a counselor, we're referring them to another aspect of our program and following them actually as they go along through our entire program, which is particularly helpful for the traumatic losses and child loss and spousal loss as well, which in families. So anyway, people stay with us as long as it's helpful for them.
I would say that it's very multifaceted, pretty multidimensional. It's structured this way in order to give interns a real depth in their learning, as well as multiple perspectives. Each intern is assigned a supervisor who meets with them on a weekly basis, on an individual basis, and provides oversight just really on a day-to-day level. And then you would receive 1 hour of individual supervision each week. On a weekly basis, the interns also all attend a group supervision group that I'm leading and facilitating. And that includes a group of trainees as well as other interns. So the group really offers the interns more support, an opportunity to review cases, discuss challenges, share learnings with each other. And I would say that we have a pretty strong reputation, as well as strong intent to provide ongoing support that's needed by the interns.
The first 2 months are very intensely focused on clinical skills needed while steadily building up a caseload. So in the beginning, the trainings come on really strong. The highlight of the early training period is that trainees observe 3 or 4 experienced clinicians providing assessments to clients and then also charting them. So it's really a very practical learning of these skills that we're really committed to assist the trainees in acquiring. And then our other early trainings include psychosocial assessments, suicide assessment, treatment goals and interventions for complicated grief, traumatic loss interventions, including affect regulation interventions, regulations for interventions for anxiety and depression, in particular, monitoring sleep and eating, somatic and nonverbal therapeutic interventions, also particularly for acute and traumatic grief. Another early training is on child and teen grief, how it manifests, what it looks like, what a family needs, and also the treatment, individual or family, and also group. And then as the year goes on, the trainings are less frequent and kind of periodic depending on the intern's needs. It's folded into the group supervision so that it's very much connected with the caseload that is currently being held by the interns. So I'm sorry, we call all of our trainees and associates interns. It's a job description, not to imply if somebody's a trainee or an associate. But as the year goes on, the specialized trainings would be things like exploring the spirituality issues that arise for people in bereavement. Certainly child loss, I didn't mention that earlier. Substance use during bereavement. Let's see, and then sometimes we also have specialty trainings on dialectical behavioral therapy, play therapy, and usually the trainers are from within our organization and also sometimes brought in from the community.
An openness and a willingness to receive feedback and learn are certainly attributes that really support success here. A willingness to work with a very diverse population that we serve, an ability to collaborate and communicate effectively with team members, and some key clinical attributes, things like empathy and sensitivity, an ability to be present and to listen to the needs of the clients can really help aid in success. All of our clinicians, I would say, draw upon their experience and understanding of grief and end-of-life issues and concerns. I'd say also that any prior experience in a health setting, a role in that area, perhaps a past profession in health services. So that could include mental health, counseling, or education. These would all be highly desirable and helpful too.
First of all, I'd like to say that most interns come in worried about what it will be like to hold a caseload of people who are grieving and to be hearing about death all the time. So that's something that most interns identify as being challenging. And it is in the beginning, but it isn't typically, the work ends up being so meaningful because the clients go to such a depth of vulnerability. They come in that way. So what feels maybe a little fearful in the beginning is quickly noticed to be acknowledged to be, really extremely meaningful right away. There's not like defenses that the client comes in with that you're working around. Most people come in and they're just right there in what they need to work on. But also, the work also involves processing our own grief and sometimes it's trauma. So that's something we all have personal responsibility about, as we know. And I'm sure your schooling through your program is speaking to that as well. And in this setting, it is particularly true that where there's not a difference between what our clients are experiencing and what we have experienced when we've gone through grief or what we potentially will be. So it's very personal work. And then on a more site-specific level, it is a very fast-paced work environment. When we get back to working together in the office, which is expected to happen sometime during this internship year, the work setting is fast-paced. The work environment, it's very supportive, but there's a lot of work. We're a very active agency. So, and I mentioned, working on site versus virtually. This year, our work has been all virtual. So our intern training has been mostly virtual, and we're hoping that that will be not the way in the coming internship year. We're going to see how that unfolds. And then another thing that can be challenging anywhere, working with any nonprofit, is knowing your limits. There's at our internship, there's more than enough clinical hours that will be offered to you. So you do learn to know what your limits are in balancing work and home life, and it's exciting. So it comes with both of the sides of that coin.
I think I would say that I found that our intern group forms very strong relationships with each other, strong and very supportive cohorts that are typically developed here, which really foster safety in learning, and being willing to be vulnerable at times, and, to access the support that's available throughout the internship. I would say that that's really a reflection of sort of the spirit and the culture that is fostered within our organization. One that, really practices the act of compassion and support as much, I find, with among staff, including interns, as we do with the clients that we serve.
And I'll just say that over time, many interns stay with our program for a second or even third year. People find that it's a rewarding place to gather a lot of hours, gather your clinical hours pretty quickly and do meaningful work. So that is an option at the end of your first year that you can apply for staying for a second year, and also have a specialization. There can be a specialization in the second year, like focusing on end of life versus focusing on grief and bereavement following a death, which is what the first year focuses on.